Chapter 1. The Idea. As dusk fell upon a quiet desert town, an orangish glow began to illuminate the sky. The summer of 1989 had just begun, and junior year was at an end. 3 friends that grew up together like brothers were sitting around trying to figure out what to do for the first weekend of summer. "Sounds good to me," said one, the quiet but most athletic of the 3. "Some camping and hiking would do us some good." "Let's do it," Steve replied anxiously, being the kind to get excited about anything that they did together. Christopher, who gave the idea in the first place, was more than pleased by his friends' approvals and gave them a nod and said, "Let's start getting our stuff together and head out early." All 3 friends took off to their homes and began their preparations for the next morning. They decided to leave the place to camp up to Christopher, and in the morning would ask him where they're going, something they usually did every time they went camping. "Whoa there, boy, what the heck is the hurry?" Christopher's father asked, curiously. "Just getting some gear ready for tomorrow," Christopher answered in an enthusiastic tone. "Hey Dad, could I borrow your handgun for tomorrow? Don't worry, I know how to handle it, and they do too." Christopher's father was a strong and very commonly sensed man, a Marine of the Vietnam era. Hardworking and firm, but reasonable and loving of his family. Christopher respected his father and his ideas about life. He always tried his best to not disappoint his father's trust in him. His father answered him in a cautious tone. "No, not this time, son. I got one of those feelings, and besides, you haven't even told me where you are going." Even after telling his father that they were headed to Lobo Wash, where he had taken him many times as he was growing up, Christopher's father would show him how to camp, hike, and respect the land. His father said that he could only take his small caliber rifle that he got when he was younger for hunting, and Christopher slowly agreed. This was not the first time that the boys had gone out by themselves to the mountains in the Arizona desert, but something seemed different. Chapter 2. The Road. The next morning came, and the 3 friends began their journey to the mountains in Steve's truck. It was still dark out when the boys loaded up the truck and headed out. "Let's get it on, man," Christopher yelled out. The humming from the oversized tires rolling along the road gave a soothing sound, a sort of rhythmic tone, something the pioneers must have felt from the clopping sounds of their horses' hooves as they traversed through the unknown frontier. The dark silhouette of the trees and bushes alongside the road seemed to pass by the windows on the truck, as if it was the wind and everything moved out of its path. These were the things that always began the journey to places that were forgotten and ignored by so many people, but for these boys was always remembered and respected. As dawn approached and the clouds filled the sky, a tiny tune from the past was filling the quiet and remote highway. "I'm 18 with a bullet, got my finger on the trigger, and I'm gonna. Oh, man, turn it up. That's the jam," Christopher sang out. "Chill out, man, it's just a song. Besides, you don't even know what it means." "Steve, my friend, you see, I do know what it means. I'm almost 18, and I have." Christopher carefully showed them his dad's holstered gun. He had taken it anyways, with some bullets, figuring they might need it for protection. He knew his dad would understand later of his decision. "Christopher, where we headed to anyway? What did you decide on? Is it a surprise?" one asked in a sarcastic tone. He told them that they were headed to Lobo Wash. It was believed to have been a place where the people of the Wahani tribe would join the Navi Pay tribe from the south and have spiritual ceremonies. All the boys knew of this place, especially Christopher, and all of the legends and horror stories that went with it. They didn't pay much attention to the stories, other than to remember how to tell them around the campfire to try to scare each other. As they arrived at the turnoff, it was already getting dark, and it started to rain, which was a very rare but welcomed and refreshing occasion. This was no bother to the boys. It was more like a challenge to them, and they looked forward to the fuss of setting up in the dark rain of the night. After continuing a few miles down the turnoff, they finally reached their destination in the mountain washes. They found a nice clearing in the wash and methodically began to unload Steve's truck and started to set up camp. "Damn it, all of the branches on the ground are wet," Steve said to the guys. Christopher, looking around with his flashlight at the trees and old fallen branches, realized that Steve was right. "Well, let's get the tents up and get some sleep. We'll look for some dry wood in the morning for breakfast." Christopher had always been the calmer and directive of the three. He would always look at a situation before acting upon it in haste. The other boys respected him for that and always trusted in him to be that way, so that they didn't have to bother with most of the serious matters at hand. "I hope this rain lets up soon, or this wash that we're in is going to fill up," Steve said in a nervous voice. Christopher agreed with Steve and decided they would set his watch for 3 hours from now to check on the rain. As the rain fell on their floppy green canvas tent, it appeared to hit it like guided missiles with the intent on destroying their old but cherished tent. The thunder was distant but violent. The lightning stretched across the sky like spider webs and flashed the dark blue desert landscape. The awkward yelps and howls from coyotes in the distance filled the gaps between the breaks in the thunder. The boys were all too familiar with the sounds of the desert night and paid it no attention, exhausted from setting up camp in the rain and trying not to get everything wet. They were asleep in no time. Beep, beep, beep. Steve's alarm was sounding off, but he wasn't getting up for nothing, and Juan, being a light sleeper, quickly woke up at the first beep. After cursing Steve in his mind, he got up and checked to see if it had stopped raining. "Shit," Juan yelled out, waking the other guys up. "What happened?" Christopher replied, "Who in the hell left the ice chest outside? The damn coyotes got a hold of it." After briefly arguing about whose fault it was, they figured it was all of their responsibility to have been more cautious about the ice chest, and agreed that they should have placed a large rock or something heavy on top of the ice chest. They decided to go back to sleep, and in the morning would figure out what they were supposed to eat. As dawn approached, Christopher was the first to awaken, and was the lucky one, because he got to see the beautiful sunrise over the Arizona mountains. After waking up the others, they began to realize how hungry they were becoming. Together, they decided to use the handgun to go hunting for some breakfast, instead of the hunting rifle. "I'll shoot, and you clean," Christopher said to Juan. "Yeah, whatever, man. I'm just hungry." The two set off, and Steve stayed behind to clean up the mess the coyotes had made of their food. Bang, 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 bang. "Man, you can't hit shit. You blind bastard. Give me the gun before I start hunting you and have some Juanito bony burritos," Christopher said in a joking manner. "There goes one," said Juan. Bang. "Oh man, you got it." "Yup, and you get to clean it. So, huh?" replied Christopher. Neither one really knew too much about field dressing a rabbit, but they've watched a lot of television hunting shows to figure it out. After skinning and cleaning the first one, they realized how little it was and continued hunting. Back at the camp, Steve was finishing the cleanup and was hoping his friends would return soon, because they had been gone all morning and he hated being alone. Chapter 3. The Paw Print. After hunting, all morning the two boys headed back to camp, hiking through the desert wash, proudly carrying their morning hunt. Suddenly Christopher saw one stop. He was pointing to something on the ground in front of him, and was looking back at Christopher. Oh man, what the hell made this? One had come across a large paw print in the ground, made by some type of huge animal. I don't know, man, but let's not hang around and find out. Let's get to camp fast, Christopher quickly said, trying not to sound more alarmed than he really was by the size of the paw print. The two hurried back, not realizing that the handgun had slipped out of their backpack. Steve was a little curious as why the two friends were out of breath when they had finally returned to camp, but he sure was glad to see the rabbits in their hands. They started a fire and spiced the rabbits with what they brought for the meat that was ruined by the coyotes the night before. Neither one mentioned to Steve about the huge paw print that they had found on the way back. They discussed it while they were running, that it would be better not to say anything to Steve since he kind of scared easily. They figured it was just a large coyote, or perhaps it was a lobo, which is also known as the Mexican wolf, that was passing through. Besides, they had the handgun, and if it came around they would scare it off. That was some good eating, man, Steve said with a satisfying look on his face. They were all full and decided to take a hike up to the site where the legends and stories were supposed to take place. They loaded up with water and leftover rabbit meat and locked up the truck. Hey Steve, don't take the keys, leave them under a rock so you don't lose them on the hike. Good idea, Christopher. Steve picked a rock by the tire of the truck, and they all gave a quick look around camp to make sure they had put everything away before they headed out. Oh shit, I must have dropped the gun when we were running after we saw the paw print one. What paw print, Christopher? Asked Steve, not too excited to hear about this print that made them run back to camp. After explaining the paw print to Steve and calming him down, they returned to the place where they remembered seeing it and were going to trace their steps back to camp. Where is it? It was right here, man, one said, frustratedly. You mean the paw print was right here? Calm down, Steve. Let's just find the gun. We'll hike tomorrow, it's getting late. The other two agreed with Christopher and started to trace their steps back to camp. Steve, not really knowing which way they ran earlier that day, followed one. I found it, Christopher yelled out like he just won a prize in some scavenger hunt. Hey guys, what do you think? Should we continue on to Lobo Wash? Christopher asked in a curious tone. I know we agreed it was getting late and we lost some time, having to come back to look for the gun. But we found it already, and I really wanted to make it to Lobo Wash. The other two boys didn't feel it was too late, and the three decided to head to Lobo Wash. Chapter 4. Lobo Wash. The loose gravel gave off a slow twisting and grinding sound from the wash beneath their hiking boots. The three did not converse much. They were trying to save their breath for the long trek through the dampened Arizona wash. The rain from the night before made the air fill with the smells of wet greasewood and ironwood. Even the rocks gave off a scent that made you think you were walking near a running stream in the woods, although these washes have only had moments of running water through the millennia. These sensations and smells only come after a rain in the desert, a treat to the boys, who usually only smell the dust and feel the heat reflecting on their faces from all directions during their usual early summer camping excursions. After hiking for about an hour, they arrived at Lobo Wash. It immediately gave off a feeling of energy that all the boys felt at the same time. Steve, you all good, man? Yeah, Christopher, my stomach just hurts, probably from the rabbit. I'm good though. The other two boys knew. It was more his nerves about this place and the paw print he now knew of. The three began to wander around looking at the remnants of the area and slowly veered in two directions, Juan and Steve in one direction and Christopher on his own. "Check out this old piece of pottery I found," Juan said intriguingly to Steve, hoping it would get his mind off the paw print. Steve, still not feeling well, quickly suggested to Juan that maybe they should not touch things around this area. Out of respect, Juan responded with, "Don't worry, Steve. I'm sure nothing bad is going to happen. Just because I was curious, and besides, I would never be disrespectful in any way and didn't plan on taking it back with us." Steve felt a bit foolish about accusing his friend of anything different and apologized quickly and blamed his not feeling well to the comment. "No worries, Steve. I'll just go tell Christopher. We better start heading back. Don't want you here feeling like crap and we're having all the fun." One went off to let Christopher know that they should be heading back soon, so Steve can hopefully start feeling better, and before it gets dark. Christopher had been out of ear distance, admiring the pictographs on the walls of the wash. "Hey, Christopher," one shouted towards him. "We should get a move on." But before he finished what he was saying, Christopher interrupted him quickly and said in a very unusual tone, "What do you think this drawing is supposed to represent?" He pointed at a drawing of what appeared to be a wolf-like creature, but standing on two legs, like a man would. Shrugging his shoulders and shaking his head, one sternly said, "I don't know, man. All I know is Steve is feeling like crap and it's getting late." "Yeah, I noticed. And you're right, we better head back now. Sure is a strange drawing though," Christopher commented, as he slowly started backing away from the rock wall of the wash, still looking at the drawing with intrigue, and then turned and the boys headed back to camp. Chapter 5. The Walk Back. As they headed back to camp, darkness started to fall upon them. "Who's got the flashlight?" "I thought you did, man," one said to Steve. "I got one. Chill out, guys." Christopher pulled out his flashlight, which didn't do them much good between the three of them trying to walk through the desert at night. As they were approaching camp, the coyotes started to yelp and howl, the night air filled with their intensifying sounds to each other. It didn't bother the boys, but they were glad to finally reach camp. Suddenly, quietness hit the desert night air. Nothing was to be heard, and the boys gave each other a look that each one was hoping the other didn't have on their face. "What do you think? Just did that. It's too quiet out here, man. Something's wrong." "Calm down, Steve. Something spooked the coyotes." "Well, it spooked me too," one said to the both of them, with a sound of uncertainty in his voice, something the other two never heard from him. The three got a fire going, trying not to listen to the nothing hanging in the night air, except their small conversations to each other. As their fire burned brilliantly into the night, they gathered around it. Christopher gave the idea to tell some of the stories that made this area what it was. At first, the other two weren't certain if they wanted to hear anything scary at this point. After laughing at the fear in each other's eyes, they realized how silly they were being and sat around the campfire. Chapter 6. The Story. "All right, who's going to start?" Christopher asked in a scary voice. One agreed to go first, because he knew he had the perfect story. He was going to tell the others about the legend of the Lobos, a legend that has haunted these mountain washes for centuries. As they waited for him to start, one put another piece of ironwood on the fire, and it created a plume of glowing embers. Steve did his best to scoot a little closer to the other two, hoping they didn't notice. One pulled some folded and torn pieces of textbook out of his pocket and sternly said to the other two, All right, here it goes, with his eyes slowly looking into the night sky. This is about a pack of lobos that ruled these mountain washes and feared no man nor beast. Hey, that's cheating, said Steve. What'd you do, steal some pages from history class on the last day of school? Steve remarked in a sarcastic tone. Pretty much, said Juan, and told them he knew that they would be telling stories around the campfire and wanted to have a good one to tell too. They all laughed, and then Juan clears his throat and begins to read. The legend happened during the last spiritual ceremony held here by the Wahani and Nvipe tribes. These tribes were not indigenous to this area, and no one knew where they actually came from. They were considered by the indigenous people as cruel and disrespectful to the land. The Wahani and Nvipe ways of tradition were unlike other tribes of the area. The indigenous tribes of the area would have their spiritual ceremonies by a sacrifice. Many spiritual ceremonies of that time consisted of respectfully sacrificing an animal that lived in the area. But, unlike their fellow tribesmen, who respected the land and all its living things in it, these two non-indigenous tribes would kill and destroy the animal in the ritual, not respectfully, and its body parts wasted, not used and eaten. It was to appease their gods and for young warriors to come of age. So, every year these two tribes would begin by hunting down any animal that they could get and use it in the ceremony. As the years went on and the ceremonies continued to become more frequent, the Lobos of this area began to despise these ceremonies and their killing of their prey. The Lobos cherished their land and the food and shelter it gave them. They were the sole protectors of these mountain washes and planned to put an end to this. The time came and the Lobos were ready. They had noticed that all the tribesmen would hunt by themselves. One by one the Lobos violently killed each and every one that were hunting and all those that had come as well, except for two young boys that had been left behind by themselves back at the ceremonial site. The alpha Lobo of the pack stood up on his hind legs and talked to the boys in their tribal tongues at the same time. Tell your people what has happened here, and to never return to this place, or the same thing will happen again. But this time no one will be spared. The boys were brave and thanked the mighty Alpha Lobo for sparing them. They returned to their tribes alone and told their people what had happened and what they were told by the Alpha Lobo. No more spiritual ceremonies were held in the mountain washes and neither tribe ever returned. That was a good one, Juan, said Christopher, smiling at Steve, because he knew that the story got to him. Steve was wondering in his mind about the legend, if it might have had something to do with the large paw print the guys had found when they were returning from their hunt earlier that day. Christopher and Juan knew Steve was concerned about the paw print, and they figured they could have some fun with it. So, as he was gazing into the night sky trying to figure out if the legend was true or not, Christopher and Juan nodded to one another and told Steve that they were going to look for more firewood before they told any more stories, and for him to stay at camp and keep the fire going so that they could find their way back. Steve agreed nervously and asked if it was cool if he could keep the gun with him until they returned to camp. Christopher said that it would be fine, and they went on their way. Chapter 7. The Howl. Half an hour passed and Steve heard nothing from the other two and began to worry. The campfire was starting to get dim, and he would be out of firewood soon. He shot into the air and yelled out their names. Christopher. Juan. Come on, guys, answer me. He got no reply from either of them. He shot into the air again and yelled, but no answer, just a long howl off in the distance. Then he heard a rock slide down the hill by the camp, and then another and another. Frantically, he began to shoot at the sounds and the howling in the distance. After emptying the gun, he quickly reloaded and fired at the sounds again. This time he yelled at his friends to hurry, so they could get out of there. He thought he heard one of them scream, but wasn't sure if it was them. All he could think of was the howl and the worst that could have come from it. When he realized they weren't coming, he scurried around the truck looking for the rock he put his keys under from when they had went on their hike earlier that day. Finally, he found them and got in the truck, locked the doors and started it. He began driving around, honking and looking for his friends. The image of the large paw print and the haunting sounds of the howls was all he could think about. But for a brief moment, he considered heading back to look around camp again for his friends. Maybe whatever he heard was gone and his friends were safe back at camp. But the image of the paw print and sounds began to run through his thoughts and brought all that to an end, and he continued to drive, being sure to head away from where the sounds came from. Realizing he was low on gas, he headed towards the road where they turned off the day before, and hopefully a ranger would drive by and help him find his friends. Chapter 8. The Reality. As the morning sun gave off a familiar orangish glow across the desert landscape and peacefully alongside Steve's truck, a long shadow of a man with a cowboy hat grew slowly up the side where Steve's head rested, asleep against the window. Steve was quickly awoken by the hard knocks against the window and realized it was a ranger. He opened the door and, not noticing the gun had fallen out onto the ground, gladly greeted the ranger. Still frightened from what had happened and half asleep, he wasn't clear to what was going on around him. He began to tell the ranger about the night's events, when he noticed that the ranger was looking to the right of his shoulder and nodding. Steve could see 2 more vehicles, where state patrol officers were behind his truck, in a ready stance. He turned back to the ranger, puzzled, and noticed he had taken a step back from him and stood in a ready stance as well. "Son, please step out of the vehicle with your hands on your head and turn around. You are under arrest as the prime suspect in the slaying of 2 young men found by their camp." Steve could only take a deep breath and breathe out the word. "What?" The paw print